Hello, and welcome back to Dancing in the Shadows. I'm your host, Jason Ring. And just before the last podcast, we were talking about my dad being a truck driver and bringing a truckload home of toys and surprising me, but telling me that I couldn't take anything. It was torture. And I was about 6 years old, and we just were starting to get into the story that changed my life forever. 7 years old. And it also altered the course of my family's life, my entire family. It was a jarring event that nearly took my life. So let's get into it. My uncle and my aunt, they show up to our house to mow our lawn because my grandfather's sick. He wasn't able to be there. And so my aunt and uncle worked with my grandfather during the summer anyways. They helped him with the landscaping business. He'd sold the waterbed store and got back into landscaping. So since he was sick, my uncle and aunt decided to finish the route that day, and I think they had done a couple of days prior. I think my uncle was probably 19 or 20 at the time. My aunt was only 15. Anyways, my uncle takes the lawnmower down off the trailer, and my aunt, gets the keys and puts it in, starts up the lawnmower, gets on it, because this is one of those tractor mowers. And if you want to know what it looks like, I'd mentioned in the previous podcast, just Google Forrest Gump mowing, and that lawnmower that he's on is the exact same one that my aunt was on, the Model 3080 snapper mower. And anyways, so she starts mowing the lawn, and I was outside playing with the ball. My mom comes out and says, "I'm going over to Grandpa's to take him some soup. You want to come with me?" I said, "No, I want to stay here and play with my ball." And she's like, "Well, play with it in the house. You're not to play with it outside." And she's like, you better stay here, but you better stay in the house because I really don't want you to get sick. So go in the house now. So I did. And my uncle went into the house around the same time, and he was in the kitchen making a sandwich for lunch for both my aunt and himself. I go back outside, put my ball down, and I see that my aunt started mowing the lawn. And I was running beside her, trying to get her to give me a ride on the lawnmower like it was a go-kart. She kept saying, "No, go away, go away." I think she may have been trying to tell me it was dangerous, but, I'm pretty young, so I wasn't really comprehending it all. I didn't understand the danger that these lawnmowers carried. I learned quite quickly, very soon after this incident. So my aunt says, "Okay, if I give you a ride on the lawnmower, will you go back in the house?" And I said, yeah. And so my aunt disengages the lawnmower blades, takes me and puts me on her lap, and then rides me around the lawn a couple of times. And I'm gleeful. I remember this moment so vividly. I get off the lawnmower, and I think I went into the house to get my ball, which I left in the kitchen where my uncle was, and he was still in there getting lunch ready. And my dad happened to be upstairs sleeping. He was, again, a truck driver, so he was, I think, probably crashed out at this point. And there was tenants that lived with us, kind of kept to themselves for the most part. So I come back outside with this little lopsided ball that I think was from a supermarket. You might remember those cages that were set up at the ends of the aisles that had those cheap plastic inflated balls that had like swirly clouds on them. They'd last you maybe a day or two, and then they'd pop or they'd deflate. Yeah, this is a ball that I had that I brought outside, and I was kicking it up in the air and running to catch it. And these balls are so lightweight, and they have such a strange rubbery consistency that even a small kid kicking this ball, you can kick it like 15 feet in the air. Like it feels cool, as a kid. So I'm kicking this thing up in the air, and I'm running to catch it. And because it's so lightweight, it comes down, but not as fast as a normal ball. So it was a little game I was playing with myself, just kicking the ball and running and catching it. Here comes my aunt, and she's mowing along these really tall oleander bushes that bordered the outside of the front yard. The yard was shaped like an L, and on one side of this L was a whole row of oleander trees, maybe 10 feet tall. And they were kind of blocking the alleyway that led to the driveway of our house. And she's mowing along this edge, and her attention is kind of more towards the right front wheel of the lawnmower, so she doesn't drift too far into the hedges and stays on a clean line forward. So here I am, just at this moment. This is January 20th of 1980, 2 days after my 7th birthday. I kick this ball up in the air, and I'm running towards it to catch it. And I slip in the grass, like I'm almost sliding into home. My right leg slips out in front of me. My left leg kind of tucked behind my thigh. And I start to try to move, and my foot is slipping, and my heel is slipping in the grass. I'm wearing these boots, too. These, I could probably remember the name if I dwell on it. Buster Brown. Boom, there it is. I was wearing these Buster Brown boots and some jeans and I think a tank top. I screamed over the lawnmower, which was headed towards me, and I was trying to move, and my foot kept slipping, and I couldn't get my leg out from underneath my hip. My aunt, by the time she looked up and saw me, she swerved kind of more into the hedges, but it was too late. The front tire went over top of my right leg, and I'm on my back. And this next moment, this is very graphic, so if you are listening and you don't want to hear this part, I suggest you turn down the volume for a good minute, or maybe 30 seconds. Yeah, turn it down for like 30 seconds starting right now. So the lawnmower went over top my leg, and the sound that it made is the same sound that you would hear in a wood chipper, but it was like a log was slowing down the motor. And then when the log was cleared, the motor sped back up. You still heard things rattling around on the inside until it was shot out the chute. Whew, gives me the willies just thinking about it. That thing that shot out the chute was my patella. My aunt, of course, immediately just freaks out. Okay, the mower's still running. It's on top of me. She's panicking and trying to figure out how to shut it off. She can't figure out how to shut it off, so she runs upstairs. And she's screaming for my dad. My dad, wakes up out of this shock of sleep and runs down the stairs. And my uncle drops everything that's happening in the kitchen, and he runs out to me. I'm still under this. And I'm turned over at this point to my belly, trying to pull myself out from underneath it. And my heel, okay, you might want to turn the volume down on this for another 30 seconds. My heel is caught on the guard that surrounds the blade because the deck is low. So it's cutting the height of grass that's, it's supposed to cut. So I have to flip over onto my back again to try to get my foot out from underneath. Whack! The top half of my foot is cut off, and the big toe of my right foot is ground. It's pulverized. They found it in the grass catcher. There was nothing left of it. They couldn't put it back on. The top half of my foot, though, was hanging by my pinky toe. And guess what? I could now clear the deck lid. My foot came out, except it was hanging by my pinky toe. This is the top half of my foot. My dad comes out by this point, and he's just in total shock. He immediately tells my uncle to unhitch the trailer. He takes off his belt, and he tourniquets my leg immediately, right at the hip, and saved my life. I still bled out pretty bad. I had an open wound from the top of my femur down to my middle of my tibia. It was open. You could see inside, bone and blood. My foot was mangled, and my dad took my pant leg, which was kind of ripped all open, and he kind of just flopped over the skin in the pant leg and carried me. He told my uncle immediately to unhitch the trailer. We're jumping in the truck. We need to get to the hospital now. They called an ambulance, and we waited like 5 minutes, and we didn't even hear a siren. So my dad's like, we can't wait anymore. We got to go. My dad jumped into the bed of the truck, and my uncle jumped into the cab and just immediately started blowing stop signs and stoplights. And on the way to the hospital, they stopped by the waterbed store thinking my mom was going to be there to let her know. And I remembered she went to take my grandfather's soup. I said to my dad, she's not there. She's at Grandma's. Bring soup to Grandpa. And my dad just said, keep going. We're going to the hospital. And we were about 3 miles out from the hospital. And my uncle's honking the horn, and I'm in such pain because the wind is like circulating, and the debris and the leaves and the bed of the truck is getting into my wound, and it's just the wind hitting my injury was just like excruciating. And so my dad made my uncle stop, and he jumped into the cab. They continued to the hospital, and my dad rushed me in. And, this is before cell phones. This is before any way we could, let them know that we're coming, to be ready. But we plowed through the emergency room door, and there was just a trail of blood from the car down the driveway into the just draining out. And they're like, oh my God, they immediately got teams prepped. They doctors and nurses came and descended upon me. And the one thing I remember saying to my dad in the bed of the truck was, "Daddy, am I going to die?" My dad had tears in his eyes, and he said, "No, you're not going to die." And I faded out. And I can't imagine what my dad was feeling. Whew. So sorry. I do remember, though, my mom coming through the doors, just, "My baby," just hysterical. And I reached out for her and called her my aunt's name, Karen. That wasn't her. It was just me fading out. And the next thing I remember was the sound of sirens and lights. And I didn't know what that was until I read a deposition at 18 years old. It was actually me being transferred from one hospital to another 3 days later. And that's the only thing I remember until the 5th day. It's because during this time I was in a coma. From the loss of blood and the shock to the body, the initial doctor, whose name was Dr. Lim, actually, but it was Lim. Ironic, I know. He's the one that put me together with pins and ordered my dad to go look for my patella, which he found 2 days later, about 50 yards from the accident. He told me he set up a grid pattern on the lawn. I think with the use of the garden hose, he'd move it after he scanned an area, and he finally found it. He said, "After I got to the area, I found it by following a trail of ants, a thick trail of ants to where it was." And he wrapped it in a napkin, brought it to the hospital. They sterilized it and put it back in my leg. I still have it to this day. My patella. Looks like, I guess, a golf ball with a chip out of it. They were able to save my life and my leg. I had to learn how to walk again. I was in a leg brace up to my hip, locked at the knee, until I was 15 years old. To say that I have suffered persecution from my peers would be an understatement. I was ridiculed. I was called names. I was berated, picked on. I mean, I'm a disabled redhead. I mean, think about it, okay? It was torture. I'm a disabled redhead who's a Jehovah's Witness who can't celebrate any holidays, stand for the flag, or even go to a birthday of a fellow friend, classmate that's invited me. I mean, honestly, I don't see how it gets much worse than that. But I still found a way to persevere, to keep moving forward, to prove that I am as good of a person, if not better than most. That was my goal, to prove to everyone I'm no different than anyone else. And where did that get instilled in me? It was my peers, the ones that teased me, the ones that made me feel inferior. You can either cave to it, or you can prove them wrong. Well, I proved them wrong. I, at 15 years old, finally told my doctor that I no longer want to wear this leg brace. I want to go home on crutches and learn to walk on my own again without assistance of a leg brace. I was tired of the sores. I was tired of the constant changing of different braces. I was tired of being teased, looked at, manipulated, or ridiculed. So we get into the next podcast. We're going to talk about my recovery from this tragic event that affected my whole family and altered the course of my history forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're enjoying this series. Please subscribe, tell a friend, reach out, share your story. Let's get through this together. Thank you so much for listening.